Mr. Harris here, and welcome back to a new video of chapter 4.2. In this video, I'm going to talk about how the embryo is going to grow into a fetus. Not Foetus, fetus. So in the previous video, let us recall what we have learned. We learned the first couple of steps in growing a baby and eventually giving birth. So the first step was fertilization. This is where the sperm would meet the ovum to eventually form a zygote, and after repeated cell divisions, you'll get an embryo. And then afterwards, the embryo would be implanted in the process of implantation to the uterine lining. All right, and now let us continue from where we left off last time. So the cells of the embryo would continue to divide, obviously, because it has to grow right after implantation. And the site where the embryo is attached on the uterine lining, that site is called the placenta. So the placenta is somewhere over here. All right, this site or this place is very, very important for the survival of the embryo. And you'll later know why. We'll see in a couple of slides. Also, you'll need to know one more thing. The umbilical cord, which is, you can consider this like a tube. This connects the placenta to the embryo. So just to show you what I'm trying to say over here is, have a look at this diagram over here. So on the right, you have the placenta, and the tube that I told you about, the umbilical cord, is right over here. So one thing you'll notice is that the mother's blood is connected to the embryo's blood through the placenta. Okay? Also, through the placenta, you'll see that the umbilical cord could connect to the embryo. Now, what is so special or unique about this connection? Or what is the significance of this connection? The embryo actually, it obtains nutrients. I shouldn't say it, let's say he or she obtains nutrients and oxygen from the mother's blood. So in other words, it is very, very important for the survival of the embryo. Just imagine, how is the embryo going to survive without getting food or oxygen, right? So through the placenta and the umbilical cord, you can see the arrows. It is going to the embryo, and the embryo could obtain the nutrients and oxygen. And where it's coming from? It's coming from the mother's blood. So basically from the mother. On the other hand, waste from the embryo also passes through the umbilical cord and to the placenta to the mother's blood for removal. Right? So it's both ways. So not only is the embryo getting nutrients and oxygen, it's also removing any waste, basically. So just now we've learned about the umbilical cord, the placenta. We know that this structure over here is the uterine lining. We know what's an embryo. But there are two more that is very important for the survival of the embryo. They are the amnion and the amniotic fluid. So what exactly are they? Let's have a look. I think this diagram is very, very cool. The amnion actually is, you can consider it to be like the outer bubble. Right? Bubble. And the amniotic fluid is inside, surrounding the embryo. So it's a fluid surrounding the embryo, and the amnion is the outer layer. So more exactly, to be more specific, the amnion is where the embryo grows inside. So let me use blue so it's easier to see. So this outer part is called the amnion. It is where the embryo grows inside and also secretes the amniotic fluid. So you can see the blue area inside is the amniotic fluid. The amniotic fluid actually, it acts as a cushion to protect the embryo against shock. So the amniotic fluid over here, you can imagine that you're inside a bubble. When you're inside a bubble, it's providing you a sort of cushion for protection, right? So this function over here is the same. So the amniotic fluid and the amnion, they're also very vital for the growth of an embryo. So right about the 8-week mark after fertilization, the embryo would start to have major organs being formed. And when we can see that there are major organs being formed, that is when we'll stop calling the baby an embryo. We'll start to call the baby a fetus. Okay? So one definition, or the definition of how we know whether it's a fetus yet or not, is when we can see that there are major organs being formed. So remember in chapter 4.1, we learned about some organs, their names, the major ones as well. So this is the same thing over here. And one thing to pay attention is it's right around the 8-week mark. All right. And after around 38 weeks, or sometimes we would say 9 months, so that is usually the time scale of a mother being pregnant. Right around 9 months later or 38 weeks later, the baby would be born. So in the next video, we'll see how the birth process is when the mother undergoes labor. But for now, let's see. The embryo, right around when it's 4 weeks old, this is what it looks like. The heart beats and the backbone would start to be formed. Remember in chapter 3, we learned about living things having backbones, or some of them don't have a backbone. And as humans, we know that we do have a backbone. And that is not a smiley face, that is an arrow. Let me draw that better. There you go. And then notice now it's 8 weeks old. I changed the name to a fetus. So it's not an embryo anymore. We call it a fetus. So the length would also increase. The weight would also increase, of course, because the fetus is growing. Major organs are being formed, including the eyes and the nose. So you can see the eyes and the nose being formed. This is a picture of a fetus at around 14 weeks old. That is when the arms and legs are becoming more developed. The eyelids and ears are being formed. So the arms are being more developed, the legs as well. And finally, when the fetus is around 38 weeks old, or around 9 months later, so it varies from a mother to mother. So the length would be roughly around, these are not exact lengths and weights, guys. So it can vary from a baby to baby. So this is when the internal organs are well developed and the fetus is ready to be born. That is when the mother would be undergoing labor. All right, so let's wrap up this part. Through a certain structure, nutrients and oxygen from the mother's blood pass to the embryo, and the waste from the embryo passes to the mother's blood for removal. So it's through the placenta. Okay, this is the site where all of this would occur. And of course, also the umbilical cord is taking part in this. All right, so that's a quick wrap up on this video from growing a embryo to a fetus. So remember, fetus is 8 weeks, roughly around 8 weeks when major organs are being formed. All right, I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.